What's up? I'm Charles Bernard.
Hey, I'm JC Mason.
Welcome to Lightning Strike. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Lightning Strike. Today, our guest is Brandan Born. Brandan is a PT student that goes to UMES, just like me. And today we're going to talk about movements and all sorts of things related to the human body. Without any more wait, Brandan, thank you for being with us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Honored to be on here.
Yes, sir. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, just to begin with, a little bit about your background, where you're from, what brought interest to the field of, the human body and movement and all that stuff, just so that we know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm in my third year of the Doctor of Physical Therapy program at UMES. There's only two programs in Maryland. I'm originally from Ellicott City, Maryland, so over on the other side of the bridge. And I've always been passionate about, fitness and working out, but I had a different career trajectory. I graduated from UMBC with a computer science degree. I worked in that field for 4 years, and then I just didn't get that fulfillment I wanted. I didn't feel purposeful with my life. And so I went back to school, had to go get a bunch of prerequisites at a community college in the evening while I worked during the day. And now I got into the program. I'm in my last year, third year of the PT program, and I'll be a full-fledged PT come August, September. So that's
Nice.
where I'm at right now.
Yes, sir. And you said you've always been into working out. When did you start really working out, and what was your purpose back then?
Oh, great question. So I grew up playing a ton of sports, soccer, basketball, football. I was always the really small guy. I had a really late growth spurt, not until like freshman year of college. So high school, I was mostly like 5'2", 5'3". I played soccer in high school for Archbishop Spalding. And then once I got to UMBC, I really explored a lot of different hobbies and sports. My roommate at the time, freshman year, was a dancer. He was a break dancer. And there was one night, after a couple drinks, he started just showing us some moves in his dorm. And I was like, that is so cool. Like, you have to teach me. And ever since that day, we've been dancing together. We don't do it too much anymore, but every now and then we get together and we just throw down. So that really opened up the door for me in terms of different kind of movement practices, right? Like I was still in the weight room lifting weights, playing basketball, playing soccer. I played club volleyball in college too. And but this breakdancing stuff was just so different. You know what I mean? Like if you see these guys, and granted, I'm not like a crazy good breakdancer, but my friends and I have competed in events for it, and it's such a passion of mine to just get out there and move and dance now, and it really opened up a bunch of doorways to how I like to work out nowadays.
That's sick. That's a very interesting perspective coming from a guy that was doing kind of traditional sports. Go ahead, dude.
If I can read, first of all, hi Brandon. Great to be able to have the chance to talk to you today. I also stalked your Instagram page before this podcast because I didn't know who you were, and I saw you were doing a lot of marathons and a bunch of running and cardio. Is that something you've always done, or is it a passion that came later on in your movement journey, I guess?
Yeah, great question again. So the running, I used to not be a big runner. I mean, in soccer practice, our coach would just drill us with all these running drills, and I despised it. And up until 2 years ago, I never really was a big runner at all. And one of my buddies put together a trip to go do Spartan races. I don't know if you guys have ever done a Spartan race, but it's essentially a obstacle course. You do a lot of running, and we made it like a cool vacation. So we got a bunch of close buddies traveled out to Scottsdale, Arizona to do this Spartan race. And I was like, yeah, I'm down, let's do it. And I had to set aside time to train my cardio up because I was never running before. And that just really was the catalyst for me because now running is one of my favorite things to do for fitness. Um, and it leveled up from there. We did more Spartan races, longer distances. I did the Salisbury half marathon last year, and then this year I decided to go for the full marathon. So in April that'll be my first marathon, and it really was a new passion of mine that just emerged. I love the mental and physical aspect of running. It's such a constant challenge the entire time, and it's been really fun training for it. To answer your question.
Okay.
That's awesome. How does your body respond to it though? Because since you've never really done it before, what was your body's response, and then do you adapt your training to be able to sustain that kind of volume and to be able to train repeatedly?
Mm, yeah, Charles, it's a challenge for sure. Balancing, lifting, the movement stuff, and running. This past semester with physical therapy school, most days I was doing two a days. So I'd wake up, I'd run in the morning, and then in the evening I would go to Pure and lift or do my movement stuff. Normally a combination of all that. I don't know if you guys know Nick Bear for VPN podcast or supplements. He is a tank. He's like 225. He lifts like a madman, but he does ultra marathons too, and he keeps his size. And that's what I really want to do. I want to be the hybrid athlete. I want to keep my strength gains, keep my size, and do all this running. Um, and I think one of the biggest challenges is staying healthy. Training for the half marathon, when I first started getting into running, I had some bouts of plantar fasciitis pain. And it's funny you asked that because now that I'm increasing the volume more and more, like last weekend, I just did like a half marathon just because my training required it. And now my foot has been like bothering me a little bit more. So it's such a big challenge from, oh, I need to push myself. I need to get out there and increase the volume. And I love doing it, but then I really have to listen to my body more and gradually build up. It's like with anything, the huge spikes of intensity, huge spikes of volume, that's where the risk is. That's where the injuries can happen. And managing that has been humbling, really, because, like you guys are athletes and work out, like you can push yourself really well, but it's challenging when your mind wants to get to places that your body isn't ready for. And
Mm,
so syncing those back up definitely a learning experience for me.
Yeah, for sure.
it's a,
It's really
it's a
interesting.
really interesting perspective to view it that way. Um, I'm kind of wondering how much does like studying, like having PT as your field of study, help you manage these problems and hurdles you can encounter? Like how much can you like help yourself by learning all of it now and having the knowledge to maybe prevent injuries or recover better? Does it help you? I'm sure it does, but in what way?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a saying I like to go by where if you went to go see a mechanic and his car at home wasn't running at all, right? I wouldn't want my car to be fixed by this guy. And I kind of view physical therapy in the same regard. Like I want to embody that healthy movement, healthy athlete that's pain free. Like my friend asked me how I could help him with his foot pain like a couple months back, and I made this like great program for him, sent him this nice PDF, and then here I am like, oh, my foot hurts now, and it's it's definitely very helpful. I'm so grateful that I'm in a field where I can get information like that because everyone's gonna have pain in their body. Everyone Physical health, if it's not your main priority now, like it's eventually going to be as we age. That's just the fact of life, like our bodies will eventually break down. And so I'm really grateful to have that knowledge. It's been helpful, for sure. Like right now in my class, we just had finals this week, and one of my classes we were talking all about the hip and all these great research-backed interventions, um, that I can now apply to my own life and to other people's lives. So I think there's one thing of like figuring out what works for me, figuring out, um, how I can overcome this injury, but like having that tool of the latest research on what interventions are effective for that body part. Like it's like the anecdotal and the didactic experience coming together, um, that can really help. Because for my foot, like I know what to do for it. I know I want to rest, or I know I need to, do these specific workouts for it, but it's it's tough because I just want to get out there and run, like,
Hmm.
um, you guys feel similarly, like the more you learn
Yeah,
what to do, it's
yeah,
like you know what to do, but
definitely.
sometimes it's hard to follow it to a T.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, personally,
I
been
mean,
through a lot of injuries. I don't know what you want to say, JC, but
no, I was gonna say you probably
yeah,
know exactly what he's saying because you've
yeah,
been through Tommy
absolutely.
John surgery and
Yeah, I've had a lot of issues with my arm with baseball, and it was just constantly. You know that your body sometimes it sucks because you'll go through your workout or you'll do something, and maybe it's just because your mind's not prepared for it. I think the body and the mind work together, coin like in a very particular way, and sometimes I feel like my body could hold on, but I haven't ever got you get to that certain level of pain that you've never handled before or you've never really bounced back well from. And then once you get there, your mind kind of, gives out. So that was more it for me. I feel like the mind's the hardest part to train when it comes to those kind of scenarios and situations. And then, to overcome these, I think you need to expose yourself to that situation over and over again and to expose it to that kind of stress so that when you get to a game or a situation that matters, your body's like, okay, we've been there, done that, whatever, we can do it. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how I view it now. But it's always a challenge, obviously, because you have something to accomplish, but then your body's telling you some other thing like, hey, dude, we can't do that.
Right.
So this is always a challenge, but
Yeah. You
it's kind of,
you mentioned like because I always see you at Pure doing a lot of
Mhm.
good shoulder rehab stuff. Like I remember,
Yeah.
I think one of the first times I saw you, you had a band against one of the squat racks and you were just doing the arm,
Mhm.
kind of like,
Yeah, ratchet strap. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I was like, that guy knows what he's doing for his shoulder for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, that's
yeah.
from my trainer. His Instagram is Dak Baseball. His name's Brady. Shout out to him, by the way. But he's the one that introduced me to those workouts, and it's pretty unconventional. And a lot of people are like, "Oh my god, it's gonna like destroy your shoulder. It's terrible for your rotator cuff." But really, it's with that principle, of exposing your body to the kind of stress that you're going to be exposed to in a game situation because
Hmm.
baseball, when you actually look at it, you're throwing a baseball as hard as you can. There's tremendous amounts of stress on your body and on your joints and all that. But then you use a light bend to do some internal external rotation, and you think that's going to prepare you for it. But in reality, your body's not ready to absorb that stress, and it's never like your training doesn't prepare you for the high amounts of stress that you're going to go through within the game.
Hmm.
So
Right.
that's and with these straps, what's cool in those impulses he calls is that you can have crazy volume. You can do it for 100, 200 reps, or for time, which equals to a lot of reps as well. And it's like, okay, now that I've done it over and over again, and I've isolated that joint, you kind of reinforce those structures, and then you're
Hmm.
ready to go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, like in PT school, we always talk about how there's a certain threshold of reaching where you're pushing your body enough that it's not causing degradation. It's like rebuilding stronger. And
Hmm.
I love what you said about, exposing your body to those situations in a controlled environment that
Mhm.
can cause the stimulus to get stronger, but not necessarily hurt it. And yeah, I completely agree.
Exactly.
Same kind of
Exactly.
principle with like with running too, you know, just gradual
Hmm.
building up of volume to the point where it hurts, but it doesn't hurt enough where I'm out for commission for a while. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. And go ahead.
I was just gonna add one thing because I've been hearing you guys talk about like pushing it to the point where it hurts a little bit and then go further. And I've just recently learned about all of that stuff with Charles telling me about it. And Terry, prior to that, in my baseball career, I've always been prescribed these, 8 reps of external rotations where it doesn't really do anything, and then you think it's gonna be fine, or like other exercises where you don't know what you're doing. And I feel like there's a conscious effort that needs to be made towards younger athletes about that kind of stuff and about that kind of exposure to really prevent injuries better. I don't know if that makes
Mm,
sense or if you guys agree with that, but like I'm learning more and more about this stuff and it makes more and more sense to me, and I just feel like younger athletes could benefit from it.
yeah,
So I think
JC, I
it's good
think
we're
that's
talking about it.
yeah, JC, I think that's a great point. I for one, if you think about a typical physical therapist, you think about those like just standing like shoulder external rotation with the bands. Um, I am not a fan of those kinds of exercises. I think they have their place, but I used to have a lot of shoulder issues when I was younger. I swore off like benching or any kind of chest or shoulder work for years, and I had I was a string bean, very narrow shoulders, and it wasn't until I stopped doing all of those like very isolated exercises that my shoulder got way better. And I'll still do them every now and then, but for me, what really helped was like functional compound movements, a lot of like kettlebell work, a lot of like full range of motion dips, weighted ring dips. I mean, really exposing my body to those heavier compound loads rather than like these like very isolated lightweight exercises. Do you agree with that? Like, do you think?
Absolutely. And I think that's something that in my past experience with certain physical therapists, we've kind of haven't gotten on the same page with these things. And, like you're talking about weighted ring dips, like this is clearly something that I think, in my experience, at least some of the PTs I've worked with would say, this is dangerous. Don't do this.
Mhm.
You're going to tear your rotator cuff or whatever. And and like, but I mean, I think it's something, it's a very high stress, clearly hard exercise, but at the same time it prepares you to get into those hard positions and then have a healthy functional joint.
Mhm.
So I'm glad you're talking about this, and you know this is clearly something that I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you were like going through, you mentioned shoulder surgeries and
Mhm.
things like
Yeah,
that.
UCL. It was yeah,
Oh
elbow
wow.
surgery. That yeah, yeah.
How long were
So
you going through that and rehabbing it? And like what were some like the best things that you did for it? I'm just curious.
well, it took a while. The first 6 weeks I was in a cast, like blocked at I don't know, a little more than 90 degrees um angle, and I think that was the first, not mistake, but the protocol that was prescribed by the doctor at the time, a surgeon, was uh that I was not supposed to move my arm for the first 6 weeks.
Mm,
And knowing what I know now, and having seen some guys bounce back really fast from this type of surgery compared to me, what these guys do is they get out of the cast like first few days, and they'll just lightly move it,
mm,
and get that range of motion a lot faster. So getting that my range of motion took forever because of that. And I it just was a long process, and I was doing my physical therapy here, and it was, I got to a point, I kind of, it got better fast, and then I got to a certain point where I kind of plateaued, and it was like, okay, I'm not making any progress here because I was still doing those exercises that didn't require that much effort, and that didn't put a lot of stress. So there was no new stimulus,
Hmm.
to help that progress. And then I went back home and I saw another PT, and I was like, this is not working. And that's when I started working with the guy I was talking to you about,
Oh, right.
Brady.
That's awesome that you
And
found
then
him.
he introduced me. Yeah, I really just saw him on Instagram, and it's crazy because sometimes you just kind of relate to certain people, and I saw him doing like those impulses and stuff, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I'm following a lot of trainers and guys that do that kind of stuff on Instagram, but I saw him one time. I think he was deadlifting, and he was just like, "Rah!" like grunting crazy, and I was like, that's my guy. And I immediately contacted him, and I
Nice.
started working with him. And, that's how I ended up, rehabbing and getting back to being healthy.
There's so much value in finding a good mentor and coach for
Hmm.
what you're doing. And
It's crazy.
and that's different from the guy who you were doing the movement training with, correct?
I don't know what kind of movement training you're referring to, but the one I was doing at Pure,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember you were doing like
that's the same.
it's the same guy.
That's the same guy. Yeah, everything I do is I'm still working with him to
Oh,
this
very
day.
cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
Like the one day you were
so
doing
it's probably stuff.
lizard crawls, I think. Do you ever
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he calls him Spider Man, or
Spider-Man, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I've
yeah,
heard like different people call it different things, but
yeah.
that's cool, man. That's
That's
super cool.
that's still with him. Yeah, so that's cool that you're into that. Like now that you're going to be a PT soon, how do you foresee yourself prescribing these exercises, and that may be a little more include some more advanced stuff. Obviously you have to deal with different patients. If you have an old lady that just wants to be able to,
Get on the
no,
ring
no, but like,
dips.
yeah, no, exactly, no way. But you're working with a range of people that's very wide.
Mm,
Uh, so how do you think you're going to include those things with different types of patients?
great question. I think for me, you know, coming into the PT setting with all these different backgrounds, seeing what's worked for me and worked for the people I've worked with before, I kind of want to change the game up a little bit with physical therapy. Um, I think PTs are commonly under prescribing their patients and not working them enough. I read something somewhere where if a typical patient comes into a physical therapy setting, most of the work they're doing is very sedentary. They're lying on the mat table for 20 minutes, then they're standing there doing these low intensity exercises, and then they might lay back down for a heat pack. We're in one of my classes is all about like the brain, traumatic brain injuries, stroke. And so a lot of what we learn is like re-education, relearning these motor patterns. And one of the biggest drivers for teaching your body to move in new ways is high intensity efforts, getting your aerobic threshold up above 70% of your heart rate max. That's going to release a lot of, I believe, like brain derived neurotropic factors that just helps establish new motor patterns and new firing patterns. And so having a patient come into my clinic, if they're not ever doing any kind of intense effort, like I don't think my treatments are going to be as effective. And to circle back to your question, it's going to be challenging because, you know, the typical person comes into physical therapy not expecting to work hard, to not be pushed. And it's challenging keeping the rapport sometimes and pushing my patients. I'm really excited to incorporate uh, the movement stuff I'm learning into that. And to give a little background, so one of my friends did this virtual training with this guy, Antonio Torres, who's based out of Thailand. And he did that for 6 months to a year. And my buddy Jake is now like one of the most athletic, strong, pliable people I know. And he really encouraged me to do that as well. So for like 3, 4 months last semester, I did that with Antonio, and just learned so much about myself, about movement, about how healing literally just moving the body can be. And I'm really excited to start sprinkling that in along with all, because not a lot of that stuff is research backed. So I'm going to be like
Hmm.
sprinkling in this new age sort of stuff with the research backed interventions. And,
Hmm.
there's going to be some resistance at first, but like I got my dad to get really into it. I rehabbed him for his first Spartan race, and it's so effective, man. Just
Hmm.
consistent effort with anything is going to get you results, and it's so much more fun, If you're coming into my PT clinic and I'm having you do like a couple lizard crawls on a circuit where you're maybe getting your heart rate up a little bit, there's music bumping in the background. I think for me as a therapist and for you, it's going to be way more fun than you just standing in the corner doing these banded exercises. I don't know if you agree with that, but
For sure. For
That's
sure.
such a great point. Like making it fun and enjoyable. Like if you can find a way to make this sometimes boring like task, make it fun and enjoyable for the people, I think that's a great idea. And if you implement it, you're gonna have a lot of success with that. I think.
Yeah. And I think also to back up on that, uh, I think rehab is training. Like rehab should be treated as training and should not be seen as rehab,
mm.
which is typical. I get in there, lay on the table, somebody's stretching my arm, and then I do three bands exercises. And and it's also you talked about the level of intensity and effort that the patient's gonna exert, and it's like this is where the challenge comes in because if you have an athlete then the level of effort is going to be low if you put them through the same thing that everybody else does. And this is what I think I was going through when I was there because compared to a 40-year-old dude that works somewhere, like I'm way stronger, more fit. So it's the band exercise doesn't really do much compared to what it does to him. But then I still go through the same kind of progression that he does, and then I get out of there. And I was like, what am I doing there? I've spent an hour there on the arm bike, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I didn't do anything.
Right. Right.
So I really like that you're talking about this, and that it has to be more intense, and just getting them engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And if people are more engaged, they'll do the exercise better. They'll believe in it more because they'll get more results from doing it well.
Yeah.
I just think that's the way to go about
And
it.
that's another good point too to touch on. Like making it fun, but then like making them believe in why they're doing it. And you guys probably do this all the time. Like if you're training for an event or you're injured, like you're picking these specific interventions and you believe that they are going to work. And a lot of time, like the placebo effect is just as effective as any medication, if not more effective. And combining
Hmm.
that belief is so important. Do you guys listen to Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Lab podcast?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
I love that podcast. And it reminds me of one clip from that where these scientists took a study of like hotel workers, and they weren't like the healthiest, but they picked a population where these ladies were getting so much exercise, but they didn't believe that they were. And so they had like a couple educational courses on like, you're walking around the hotel all day, you're sweeping, vacuuming, doing laundry, you're burning all these calories. And they just taught them like they are actually getting a lot more exercise. And then when they compared that to the group that didn't get that education, it was a vast difference over like 6 weeks. Like their blood pressure went down, just a lot of systemic health markers improved just from them like believing that what they're doing is healthy. And in PT school, we talk about that all the time with like motivational interviewing and like sitting down with your patient and establishing like what your goals are, why you're doing this, and constantly encouraging them. Um, that belief, man, is just it's so important because if you're not doing something with purpose, like why are you doing it, right?
Hmm.
Exactly.
I think that ties up nicely to what Charles said earlier in the podcast when you talked about like the mind hurdle to overcome between the body and
Mm,
it's nice to hear that study because I guess there's a neurological link between how are you gonna, like you said, just set your aim straight, and it actually can improve the physical. I think that's mind-boggling to me that the mind can influence what the body does. It's just crazy to me.
Yeah, yeah, so true, man. I think
It is.
in like my future PT clinic, I wanna combine some sort of like holistic practice where um, there's either like a counselor on staff or some kind of like coaching intervention, or even just like meditation and breath work after the PT session. Um, I saw a couple studies where meditation and mindfulness and how effective it is for improving healing rates of injuries. And yeah, like JC, that's a great point. The mind is everything, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And I think that also highlights a little bit another point where your job, the first thing that you need to conquer, the first box that you need to check off is that to create that trust and that relationship with the person that you're treating. Because before anything else can happen, if you want to have an effective result from your program or your rehab thing, you have to build that trust so that after that you can move forward. That person can believe in what you're telling them to do.
Mm, yeah, great point. Great point. I can come in with the best interventions, but if you don't like me, if you don't trust me, like those interventions are not going to do
Exactly.
anything.
Exactly.
I think I think one problem with that is with social media and stuff, and there's so much exposure to all these different philosophies. Like one guy's doing that, one guy's doing that, one guy's doing that, one that, and you're like overwhelmed with all these different trainers and ways to do stuff that it can become hard to like pick one and stick to one. Like I read this book called The Paradox of Choice, and it says exactly that. Like when you have too much choice, you can't build that choice because you're like, what about the other guy?
Mm,
Is that guy doing something different? Like, am I missing out on something? So if you're able to narrow out that choice and pick one and stick with one and build that relationship, even if it's like not the absolute best person in the field to do it, but you have that trust and you're confident, then you're not worrying about these other therapists, then perfect. Like go with
hmm.
that.
Yeah, JC, that's so
Definitely.
interesting. They say that like in PT school, if we're treating younger patients, they're going to stick around a lot less than the older patients because of that factor, like social media. They'll be seeing like all these different exercises
Yeah.
online that they're just going to like jump around to the next best shiniest thing, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah, that's funny.
Definitely. And I'm sure that personally, I'm the worst. I think with when it comes to that because I've been through so many injuries and so many different processes, and like this worked, but then I'm here in Maryland, so I can't have that anymore because the other thing was in Canada, and then I'm trying to find somebody, and I'm like, it's not going to work. It's not that guy. It's not doing the same thing. So you get so like caught up in your own head and stuck within your own beliefs. It's so hard to you know it's really that relationship that's going to break those chains a lot more than what you're telling the person to
Mm,
do. If you really believe, and it's hard for PT, like especially you know like I totally understand younger generation with everything they see and all being like, how do you know, like, says the guy that is following the so-called self-called expert on Instagram, like,
right,
that does
right.
whatever.
What about it? Like if you guys were going to see someone, or trainer, PT, anyone, like what about it would you be like, okay, this guy knows his stuff? Is it his background? Is it his big following?
Hmm, that's a great question. For me, if the guy just sits down with me and like takes the time to like learn about me and like what my goals are and what I want to accomplish, and sits down and then shows me some, because obviously I'm not a PT, I haven't studied this, so I'm gonna have to trust the guy, and I trust these guys because I don't know much about it. I'm curious about it, but I haven't studied it. But like if the guy sits down with me, I guess, and takes the time to craft me a personalized plan, I think that would be a big step for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
instead of just
Yeah.
throwing these random exercises, like
I
the
think
same exercises for every player. You know?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to me is when the person listens, because
Mm,
everybody has their different stories, and somebody that does something so often, repeatedly with different people, gets in a rhythm, and then oh, I like this exercise, I'll give it to everybody. I like this, I like this. They kind of get into they create that kind of mold generally for people
mhm.
that has given more results than non-results. So they're like, it's good enough, we'll do that. But then you talk to them, and the difference for me between people that have helped me and people that haven't helped me is the people that actually listened to my stories. Like, hey, this is like, instead of, oh yes, this is that, whatever, like you don't even have time to finish your sentence and they already have a solution, and you're like, okay. And then they show you that exercise that you're like, no, like that's not it. But maybe they would have shown me that same exercise, but waited till I finished my thing. And it's that's why I brought up the relationship part and the trust that you need to build. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And at the end of the day, if the person is sincere, like you're listening to me talk right now, that means that you're also going to question yourself after that more and be like, hey, what really is the best thing that I could make him do, considering everything that he just said,
Mm.
and considering that you actually listened and not just, yeah, okay, you're going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That great point.
Hmm.
I feel like the personalized treatment plans to get you back to specifically what you want to do, rather than because like I have so many friends these days hitting me up, be like, I have this injury, how can I help? And I have so many PDFs that I've created for other people that sometimes I just I just send because I don't have time
Yeah,
to listen to exactly what they're trying to get back to, and um,
yeah,
it saves a lot of time and it's efficient, but it's not nearly as effective as if I had like a call with them, figured out specifically like what's going on, what their goals are, and then modified that just for them. So I think a lot of
yeah.
these trainers like they have these blueprints, these just standard templates, and it'll probably help them a decent bit, but yeah, creating that individual plan, like listening to them is just so much more
Hmm.
effective. I feel like physical therapy, that's really what it all is, you know? It's just giving the person the time of day, building a connection, and then the exercises and the treatment are just like the cherry on top. If you have a person that
Absolutely.
cares about you, that wants you to get better, like that's some good momentum right there.
It's so helpful.
Yeah, really. And then you pair that with a little bit of results here and there
Mm.
where, oh shit, I got better today. Then you got that momentum going, you get that trust even, stronger. And then, you're going to be successful. Your athlete's going to come back, or your patient or whatever.
Hmm.
And then, you've done your job. And then you also, created a relationship that might help you, or, that might flourish into something else later down the road.
Yeah, yeah. It's really about teaching the person, working with the person to help them help themselves, promoting that
Hmm.
independence rather than the dependence to bring you back for as a patient,
Hmm.
even though the
Yeah.
paycheck
It's an
would be
amazing
nice.
quote.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Obviously, I mean,
that's a really good point. That's we see that a lot nowadays. Uh, you know, how professionals are just going to be like, hey, this, do the same thing on everybody. Come back next week, and then you come back next week for the next 6
Hmm.
years,
Like you never really want
and
them to get
you still
better.
have your back
Yeah.
pain. Exactly. Yeah. Which
that's a weird
Hmm.
paradox. Do you think
hmm
do you think it happens? Like, do you think it actually happens in the field where like consciously PTs will go out of their way to like uh make the people come back for longer and longer and longer? Do you think it actually happens or no?
I think so. I think so for sure.
Okay.
Especially with a cash-based clinic, they live and die by how many people are coming in and not just like the insurance payments. But if I get you better very quickly, you're gonna go tell people how quickly you got better from me. So I think it's like a kind of
mm,
a balance, right?
definitely,
Hmm.
definitely,
But I think at the end of the day, it's
and
you
you,
want them getting
Interesting.
better as soon as possible.
yeah, Yeah, and you also have, social media nowadays. It's so much easier to show off your results. And if you actually get
Hmm.
results and you help people do tremendous things, I'm talking mostly about athletes. Obviously, it's easier to show that than somebody that, just doesn't have back pain anymore and can work their
Mm,
job better. But uh, I think when you're able to demonstrate those results, then people are drawn to you a lot faster too. So even though you might not have them come back over and over again, you get those new people to, oh, that guy looks pretty good.
hmm.
Let me see,
Yeah, for
if
sure.
I can go there.
Um, Quick question for you guys. You guys said you both played baseball, right? I feel
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
I played baseball when I was younger, but nothing at the high competitive levels. Um, I feel like something like pitching seems such a mental there's such a mental fortitude component to it. And I'm just curious, like how do you guys, lock in if you have a big game coming up? Like what are your favorite strategies and tools you use for staying focused for those big games so that you can really pitch your best game?
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's a good
I
question.
can start. I
Go
was
ahead.
a hitter. I played professional baseball within the Toronto Blue Jays organization for the past 4 years, and so what I've learned works best for myself and for most hitters was routine and consistency,
Mm,
and to try to get the emotions out of it most of the time, and to just rely on. I do the same thing. I come in every morning. I do the same stuff that gets me right, and that builds that trust, so that when it's game time, you can just say, "All right, I did everything." And now I just play and I just compete. So I think preparation is key, but honestly, repetition every day to do the exact same thing. And then when something goes wrong, you can go look at that routine and actually make a change. Because if you're just going in and doing random stuff every day, you don't even know what to change because it's not
mm,
consistent. Um, but that's for hitting. I don't know. For pitching, it's probably different because it's more of a Charles, you can talk about it more.
Hmm.
But hitting it's every day, so it's really different. And you're failing all the time, so it's a lot of mental preparation. Also, like meditation and breath work was really useful for me as
mm,
well. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's different for everybody. Everyone has different, recipes and does things that work for them. But personally, it was a challenge, especially coming back after surgery, to get that back into that routine and those habits because you kind of lose them. I haven't pitched for, not, I'm pitching now, but when I came back, like, which was last year, it had been almost 3 years since I had played in a real game. So it's hard to, you don't even remember what you were doing back then. Really, it's just kind of your mind remembers the last time you pitched, which was probably painful and you were probably struggling. So for me, it was getting the focus out of myself. Really, it's stop being conscious about the pain and being because my goal, you're a pitcher. Your goal is to get outs. It's to get the guy in front of you out. But after my surgery, because I didn't want it to hurt, my goal wasn't not getting outs. It was more I don't want it to hurt.
mm,
Let me try to arrange my body in a way that's efficient enough so that it doesn't hurt my arm because that in my brain is danger. That equals injury. That equals I can't play for
hmm.
3 years. So that was the biggest challenge personally to like, okay, like, but if I think back, like it did hurt before I got hurt for real. I did have pain, which is part of the game because it'll happen. Pain doesn't equal injury, but after you've had that big injury, it was kind of a trauma. Like for me, it was just all right. Like, and I'm still in that process of getting the focus out of myself and remaking it, refocusing on what the game actually is. It's me versus a hitter. It's not me versus my body.
Mm,
It's so for me now. The way I'm approaching this season, is really bringing it back to its simplest form. I've repeated this movement millions of times. I've thrown since I'm 5 years old, and I don't have to think about it to do it. But because I was always thinking about my arm, it's like, oh shit, I can't. I don't want it to hurt. But now it's more like, okay, I'm gonna just freaking throw the ball as hard as I can to get that guy out, and you're making it a game. against the other guy, which is the goal of the game.
All right, so Brendan, I just wanted to ask you, like we usually do with our guests, do you have any like podcast recommendation? I know you talked about the Uberman one, which we love already, and also maybe book recommendations concerning the topics we discussed today.
Yeah, great question. I love talking about podcasts and books. So yeah, Huberman right now for me, so informative. I really like the Chris Williamson podcast.
Yeah.
You guys
He's cool. Yeah.
I like
such an
him
awesome
a lot.
dude. I like The Game with Alex Hormozy. He has some good stuff. Let's see. There's you guys know Lewis Howes?
I don't.
Oh, no.
The podcast called The School of Greatness, and
It's a new
he
one.
does a mini version of that called the Daily Motivation Show, where he just takes clips from his bigger podcast and then inserts it into like 15-minute clips that you can listen to every day. So
Oh, that's cool.
those are the main ones. I find myself listening to a lot of like general health or mindset information, and then some days in the long drive, I should probably listen to more physical therapy related podcasts. So there's a couple I listen to there, like the show, but those are very much more niche than Chris Williams. So that's it for the podcast. In terms of books, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a huge fantasy fiction and sci-fi nerd.
Really?
So
Okay.
Cool.
every night before bed, maybe my dad read too many bedtime stories to me, but every night before bed I load up my Kindle and I read for like 20-30 minutes, just like Game of Thrones type stuff, very epic fantasy. I just get lost in there. During the day, that's when I read the nonfiction self-improvement books. And I have one right here. This is one of my favorite books. It's the Daily Stoic.
Yes.
Yeah,
Love that one.
so good, right? So I read that every day in the morning. And then in terms of just like my favorite books overall, do you guys know Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's on my list. I need to buy it. It's on my list.
Oh, definitely got to read that.
Okay.
His story is just crazy. I actually have a picture of Viktor Frankl in my room just to look at, like that book definitely changed the way I think in terms of chasing purpose. I'd mentioned like purpose and fulfillment earlier. Let's see what else.
Have you heard about Gulag Archipelago?
I think I've
It's a similar one to. So he was in the Jewish concentration camps, and the other thing I'm talking about is the Russian, like communism part after with Stalin and such. And it's crazy. It's a crazy book. I haven't read it, but it's on my list too. And I heard those two books are very similar. So for anyone who's interested in that,
You said Gulag Archipelago?
Gulag Archipelago, yeah.
I will definitely add that to my list. Yeah, what else? A recent book. You guys know Bruce Lee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's called My Friend Be Like Water. His daughter wrote a biography about Bruce Lee, and all of his whole story, all his little life lessons. Bruce Lee was really into like philosophy and a lot of arts that I never knew about. And I read that book at a time when I did a 3-day fast, and that was very interesting. Like absorbing all that knowledge while absorbing no food at all, and
that must have been crazy.
Yeah, it was a nice little like spiritual retreat for me. So
that's awesome. That's a cool experience. I might have to try that soon too.
Brendan, I'm just wondering, like, what about fiction books? Like, I stick to mostly nonfiction for some reason, but I've kind of been wanting to try one out.
Hmm.
Do you picture the story in your head? Like, are you able now to like picture the characters and stuff happening, or like what's the I don't know how should I approach a fiction book?
Mm, that's a great question. I would say as I'm reading it, I'm just I'm like visualizing it in my mind how the author just depicts the characters, and then but
Yeah,
it's not purposeful. You know what I mean? Like
it just
I
happens.
just I just get lost in that, and as I'm reading, I'm it's almost like I'm watching the movie of it in my head as I'm reading it. Um, and I love self improvement books, nonfiction. They're great, but I've learned the most from my fiction reading, from the lessons that
That's interesting.
their trials and tribulations, and I think to me that's a big part of why I read it, because I see myself in the characters that I read, and I like the stuff they go through. I feel like I'm going through that at times. You know, it's an emotional journey, especially when these books are over 1,000 pages. It's months to read them, and I'm so invested, and it's you guys can tell I'm getting excited just talking about it, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, man, I would definitely recommend diving into the world
Yeah, I want to try it out.
I have some good starters for you if you want to.
Okay, maybe I'll
Sick.
I'll, I'll reach out. I'll give you a follow on Instagram and ask for some good fiction books.
Yes,
Sounds
sir.
good.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, same. It goes same way. Like I'd love hearing about book recommendations from people. Um, like I think you guys are pretty insightful, and so if you recommend a book, I'm like, I definitely need to read that because I trust your opinions. You know, like the archipelago one. I'm like already thinking about that. You know.
All right, you should look
Well,
it up.
it goes both ways, man. I'm definitely gonna look into that Viktor Frankl book soon too,
Absolutely, man.
and all those podcasts as well. Well, I think that wraps it up in a beautiful way. Brandon, thank you so much for your time, and it was really, really fun and interesting to talk to you about all these things we covered today. It was a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. It was a pretty spontaneous thing. I feel like
Yeah, for sure.
I connected with you, Charles, last week.
Yeah,
Um, but I'm looking forward to more collaborative videos. And
yes, sir.
yeah, thanks
Yeah,
for having me, guys. It was fun talking to y'all.
yes, sir.
Thank you,
Talk to
Brandon.
you soon, man. We'll talk to you again soon for sure.
All right, brother.
Yes, sir. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.